Good to go? Okay. Good evening, Council, SLT, anyone who is, any residents watching. See, we have quorum. I call this regular council meeting to order on Monday, July 13th, 2020 at 6:31 p.m. Approval of agenda, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a motion by Councillor Hildebrand and seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that the agenda for July 13th, 2020 regular meeting of Council be adopted. Mr. Mayor, I am aware that Councillor Wink would like to make a motion with regard to item 10.2.9.
Yes, so I'd like to move 10.2.9 forward on the agenda to be included immediately following the Pelham Active Transportation Committee presentation 4.3.1.
So through Mr. Mayor, we just need a seconder for that motion.
Yep. Councilor Hildebrand.
So I'll call the vote on that amendment. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Oh. Yes.
Thank you, and the vote carries. Mr. Mayor, if you want to call for any further amendments to the agenda?
Yep. Any further amendments? Then I see a hand by Mr. Councilor Hildebrand.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to move item 4.3.2, which is the CCC report, to be the first presentation on the agenda prior to 4.1. And I'd also like to move agenda item 13, item 0.3, which is bylaw 4252-220, and bylaw item 4251-220, which are items 2 and 3. I want to make a motion that these two bylaws be divided for separate consideration and that they be considered immediately following the Cannabis Control Committee delegation.
Madam Clerk.
So we need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Hahn. So this will be the vote on the motion by Councillor Hildebrand. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Any further changes to the agenda, Mr. Mayor?
Not seeing any. I think we're good.
So then I will call for the vote on the agenda as amended. And Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Unanimously, the vote passes.
Okay. Now we will have any councillor have to disclose a pecuniary interest or general nature thereof after viewing the agenda. Not seeing any, I will ask the clerk to please note that. We now are hearing of presentations, delegations, regional report. Madam Clerk, the motion.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the first item on the agenda is the tax write-offs under the Municipal Act, Section 357 and 358. For the record and for the information of members of council, the tax clerk and the treasurer did reach out to all of the persons impacted by this to determine if anyone wanted to attend the council meeting to speak. And Mr. Kaiser, Stephen Kaiser, is one who received the tax notifications, and he just wished to indicate to council that he's in support of the changes. We did not hear from anything further. So I'll present the motion, Councillor Kaur, and seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that council receive the taxes written off report from the Corporate Services Department, and that council approve the taxes written off report in the amount of $4,569.95 as per the Municipal Act, Sections 357 and 358. If you'd like to call for discussion on the motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
So I'll call the vote. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
So now we have presentations, but now we go to the CCC. Is that correct?
So through the adoption of the amendments to the agenda, the first delegation will be the Cannabis Control Committee. And I believe that the chair of the committee, Mr. Nohara, and the planning consultant, Mr. McDonald, have information to present to council.
Okay, gentlemen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
And Nick, can I just do a sound check with you?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
All right, perfect. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you again this evening. And I really couldn't be happier. We updated an aggressive schedule back on June the 1st, and we're on it. And thanks to council, to staff, to Nick, who's here with me from Meridian Planning Consultants, to my colleagues at the Cannabis Control Committee, and most recently, as of Friday, actually, to the region, Niagara Region, this is a bit of news, gave us their formal exemption to the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment that Nick is going to speak to you about in a few moments. So while we were confident we had it, we actually now do have it. And that just means everything before us is in council chambers this evening. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm here to answer any questions once Nick finishes his update to you. You have heard from us back on the 15th of June, and I think we're on track with what we told you we would do, and I'm just going to turn it over to Nick to move it along. Thank you, Nick.
Great. Thank you very much, Tim, and good evening, members of council. So my name is Nick McDonald. I'm the president of Meridian Planning Consultants, and we were retained by the town through the committee in January of this year. Since that time, we've reviewed the considerable amount of work that the committee completed before I was retained, and obviously met with the committee to discuss many of the issues facing residents in the town. And it became very clear and apparent to me that there were some clear adverse effects being felt by many residents in the town from the existing operations. And there was a need to develop a path and a way forward to ensure that there was a proper process in place before any future operation can be established in the town. And that was really my understanding of the mandate that the committee had, and certainly my marching orders as a land use planner. With all of that, I did prepare a report in early April with a series of recommendations to the committee and to the town. The report took into account the great work already done by town staff on this matter. There was a land use study completed. It included a wealth of information and a number of recommendations that I considered, some of which I changed through my assessment and analysis, but certainly they did a great deal of work to help me get to the point I am today. The committee as well did an incredible amount of work too, and certainly provided me with the technical basis and background for making the recommendations I am going to be making to you tonight. With all of that being said, a draft official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment was released in early April, and it went out for public review. We received comments from many residents who had obviously concerns about what they were already experiencing in the town. We had comments from the industry, we had comments from the region, and we had comments from the Niagara Escarpment Commission. I looked very carefully at all of those comments and took them all very seriously in preparing updated versions of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment that I'll be speaking to you about tonight. And in the end, I believe that the product of the work is a very good balance between providing a path forward for future operations should they wish to consider locating in the town, and protecting the overall public interest, which is to ensure that uses that are not compatible with sensitive uses are properly planned and properly set back from those sensitive uses. And I think we've struck a real good balance as part of this process. And as Tim indicated, I'm also extremely pleased that the region of Niagara, or Niagara region, was very supportive of the work we have completed and has granted an exemption for this official plan amendment. So that certainly is very good news. With all of that being said, we did prepare to support the final official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, a recommendation letter dated July 6, 2020, which I believe is in your agenda package. I'm not going to go through that letter in any detail, but attached to that letter was the regional letter that came in before that letter was written, and that's the one, dated, just flipping through papers here. That was the one that was dated, that is the one dated July 3rd, 2020, and that's the letter that indicated the region's support for the OPA and ZBA in particular. In addition, I prepared an addendum report which spends quite a bit of time reviewing all of the comments that have been submitted, and also providing my rationale for the changes that were made to the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment in response to the comments made. I felt and still believe that it was very important for there to be a very traceable and transparent process followed in developing the planning instruments, so that anyone who is following can see how we arrived at our final conclusion in terms of a recommended official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. With that being said, I'd like to spend a few minutes on the two instruments that are before this council this evening for consideration, with the first being the official plan amendment document itself. And that is also in your agenda package. It will be attached to my addendum, but I also believe it's been provided separately. The the final official plan amendment is dated July 5th of 2020. And I'm just going to take you through page by page so that there is clarity on what is being proposed. However, I don't plan on reading the amendment for you tonight, just to give you a summary. So if you turn to page part A, the preamble, and you'll see on page 3 the purpose of the amendment, and this was done very clearly in response to comments made by Niagara region in particular, is to establish permissions for indoor cannabis and industrial hemp cultivation in the agricultural area subject to a zoning bylaw amendment, and to establish the criteria to be relied upon when considering such applications. Essentially, the product of this work is the establishment of a planning process that means anyone who wishes to develop a new indoor cannabis or industrial hemp operation, whether in an existing greenhouse or in a new greenhouse or other building in the town, would be required to apply for a rezoning, with the policies in this amendment being relied upon to make a decision on that application. As a consequence, the amendment applies to all lands within the good general agricultural, specialty agricultural, and industrial designations, and of course within the Niagara Escarpment Plan area as well. As we already know, the Cannabis Act and the regulations under that act basically allow for licenses to be issued without there being any municipal oversight. In other words, they don't require any proof from the municipality that lands are properly zoned. They don't require anything from the municipality, for that matter, before a license can be issued, although they do have to be notified. We do, and on the basis of the well-documented concerns within the town, there clearly are adverse effects experienced by existing residents. Those have been well documented. I've certainly heard loud and clear from members of the public about those adverse effects, and of course they are very, very real. And those adverse effects are as a consequence of the odor that emanates from the cultivation of cannabis. The amendment does recognize that cannabis is an agricultural use. This was important to obtain the sign-off of Niagara Region. Clearly, it is an agricultural use. A number of other municipalities have called them industrial uses or commercial facilities and so on, but in the end, it is an agricultural use as a consequence of it being planted in the ground and harvested for some purpose. There already is a precedent in Ontario with respect to how odor issues are dealt with from other types of agricultural uses that are permitted. And those are in the form of the minimum distance separation guidelines, which apply to new and expanding livestock facilities in the province. Those guidelines do not apply to cannabis. And in the absence of there being proper guidelines, the town of Pelham, as is every other municipality in Ontario, has to rely upon whatever it has in its own toolbox to regulate this type of use, and particularly the adverse effects that come from it. So essentially, until the province does come out with guidelines, it is up to municipalities to figure out a path forward to strike the balance that the MDS guidelines do for livestock facilities. With all of that being said, the amendment, as mentioned, requires a rezoning for a new indoor operation. It also identifies the studies that are required to support such an application in the future, and they include an emission summary and dispersion modeling report, a contingency odor mitigation plan, a light mitigation plan, a contingency light mitigation plan, and a traffic impact study. These studies would be in addition to any other study identified by the planning department at the time an applicant comes to the town and attends the required pre-consultation meeting. The results of these studies are intended to establish whether the site that is being selected or has been selected is appropriate with regard to the location of other sensitive uses in the town. And we do anticipate that if someone makes such an application, a key discussion item through that process will be what setback is appropriate given the nature of the use and the nature of the sensitive uses that exist in the area as well. The amendment also sets out a range of setback guidelines that would be considered at the time of an application. These setback guidelines, which I'll talk about in a minute, are intended to be just that, guidelines. They're based on best practices, they're based on information provided from the Cannabis Control Committee, and they are intended to inform the process, but not to establish a rigorous set of setbacks that would be applied when a proponent comes through. So that's a broad overview of the amendment itself. And if I turn to the amendment in Part B on page 6 of the document, you'll notice that a new section is proposed to be added to the official plan, and that's section B2.1.5. And within this section is included a number of development criteria that would be applied when an application is submitted. And these are listed in Roman numerals number 1 through 8. And essentially, the intent here is to ensure that whatever is being proposed represents good planning, and the impacts, if there are any, are avoided if at all possible, and if they're not avoided, they're minimized and mitigated to the greatest extent possible. Turning to the bottom of page 7, there is also an additional set of criteria that would be applied if a component of a proposed facility was an agricultural related use. And that use would involve something that goes beyond the cultivation and some processing of the product being grown. So for example, if they decided to package the materials for retail sale on the property, that probably goes beyond cultivation, and that's when it would be considered an agriculture related use in accordance with the provincial policy statement. There are extensive guidelines on agriculture related uses issued by the province that would be relied upon if there was a component of a proposal that involved such a value add item. Section B2.1.5.2 sets out the specific required studies. This section is quite technical and certainly benefited from the technical expertise on the committee, certainly in the drafting of this section. So item A deals with the emission summary and dispersion modeling report. This is very common for engineers, not so common for those who are not engineers, but this is a type of study that is typically required in a number of different circumstances, and certainly is well known in the province. The second one deals with light mitigation, and the third one deals with traffic. Those are the three significant issues that were identified, certainly through the process, that we need to ensure are considered. But as I mentioned earlier, and I would stress, they're not the only planning considerations that would be considered through a future application. There may be other issues to consider, such as servicing, water supply, stormwater management, and so on, that would routinely be asked for by the planning department if an application was submitted. In terms of the scope of the required studies, those are set out in B2.1.5.3. There were a number of comments submitted, particularly by the industry, on the nature of the studies and their extent. And this particular section essentially indicates that at the time someone comes in to discuss a proposal, the scope of the required studies would be on the table for discussion. And of course, the scope would be very much based on how big the operation was and where it was located. The next section deals with the need for setbacks, and that's section B2.1.5.4. And within this section, it's indicated again that the avoidance of adverse effects is a first principle. But we do recognize that that's not possible. So if they cannot be avoided, then minimization and mitigation are the next tools in the toolbox. And that certainly is what we're looking for through any future application. So the setback guidelines themselves are listed in items 1 through 4. And again, they have been identified through consultation with the Cannabis Control Committee. And we have included wording within this section based on comments made by Niagara Region to the effect that these are really guidelines, and there would not be a requirement for an official plan amendment in the future if an application came in that was not in accordance with these setbacks. In other words, the setback required was less. No, they would not have to amend the official plan if that was the case. On the bottom of that page, page 10, is basically a list of the reasons why it is not possible to predetermine a setback for cannabis-related uses in the town. While it would have been easier, quite frankly, to just put a number in the official plan and zoning bylaw, there are so many factors that have an impact on what that setback should be. It was my professional planning opinion that it was not possible to do so. And essentially, this list of reasons is my rationale for recommending that there be a zoning bylaw amendment process established for these types of facilities in the future. And I'll just rhyme them off very quickly. Whether a proposed facility is a greenhouse or an industrial type building has an impact. Whether the greenhouse already exists or is purpose built would have an impact on the setback. Of course, the size and scale of the facility would have an impact. Proximity and number of sensitive land uses in the area, including those on vacant lots that are zoned to permit a sensitive use. The location of the proposed facility in relation to prevailing winds, the nature of the adverse effects that exist at the time in relation to other facilities in the area, and of course, the impact of topography on the dispersion of odor. And those reasons are collectively my reasoning for not establishing and predetermining a setback for indoor cultivation and industrial hemp cultivation in the future. I should note, because I didn't mention it at the outset, the amendment does not deal with outdoor cultivation. That is also considered to be an agricultural use, and it is not subject to the policies within this OPA, but I will come back to that when I talk about the zoning bylaw amendment. As I go through the amendment, there are a few other sections being added. One is being added to the specialty agricultural designation. That's the part of the town where the Greenbelt plan applies. There was a specific sensitivity identified to this type of use being located in this area because of the nature of the sensitive uses, the topography, prevailing winds, and the microclimates that exist. And in an earlier iteration of this OPA, we had recommended that instead of just requiring a zoning bylaw amendment for a future facility, that there would also be a need for an official plan amendment. That requirement has been removed from the final version of the OPA at the request of the region of Niagara. And I agreed to it because in the end, there still would be a planning process through the zoning bylaw amendment process to ensure that these facilities were properly looked at. So within this particular section, there is recognition of the unique nature of this area, and it does recognize that it will probably be more challenging to achieve approval within this part of the town, given the unique nature of the topography and the microclimates that exist. I guess in closing as well, the same policies are being added to the industrial designation, which applies to a small area in the southern part of the town. And we've also included references in the amendment as well to the Niagara Escarpment Plan area with the very short policy reference indicating that if the Niagara Escarpment Commission is in receipt of a development permit application for a new facility, an indoor facility within the Niagara Escarpment Plan area, the Commission would take into account the policies in the town's official plan regarding this type of use. The last section, section number 7, indicates that site plan approval would be required for all proposals as well, and a number of specific requirements were also added into the site plan approval section. The next document I want to talk to you about briefly is the zoning bylaw itself. It is also dated July 5th. And what it does is it establishes 2 new zones, the A agricultural-can zone or cannabis zone, and the other one is the M2-can zone. These zones would not be applied to any property in the town at this time. They would only be applied when council has determined through the rezoning process that it is appropriate for a site to be rezoned for indoor cultivation facility. The bylaw also in item 2 includes a number of definitions that can be relied upon by the town. By including definitions for uses and then not permitting them in any zone means that they're effectively not permitted. And this is essentially what we're trying to do here, is to ensure that a new use has to go through a process of amending the bylaw to be permitted on a particular property. Item number 3 includes a parking requirement for these types of facilities based on a best practices review that we carried out, and also based on some knowledge of the number of employees in relation to floor space of existing uses in the town. Item 4 deals specifically with outdoor cannabis related uses, and it requires a minimum setback of 300 meters for the outdoor cultivation from a sensitive land use. This setback is based on best practices, is also the setback used by the County of Norfolk, which has considerable experience with this matter and is very much a leader, or at least the first leader in terms of dealing with this issue in the town, in the province. Item number 5 includes provisions for the A-CAN zone, and you'll see that permitted uses in this zone are cannabis related use indoor and industrial hemp related use indoor. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do recognize that there may have been some confusion about what the intent of these setbacks are. And they are not to establish setbacks from sensitive uses from a proposed facility. The actual setback that would be required is only established after a proponent goes through a process with the town and determines what that setback should be on a case-by-case basis. The minimum lot frontage and the minimum lot area and the setbacks included within this section are intended to deal with the physical aspects of these very large facilities. So as an example, we are establishing a minimum lot area of 10 hectares, 25 acres for this type of use in the future. And that's based on our experience with existing uses in the town and elsewhere. And once you establish that minimum lot area, then you work out what the required setbacks are from lot lines to ensure that the building is located an appropriate distance from adjacent properties and from the road. In addition to that, we are setting a maximum lot coverage of 30% on a lot to be used for this purpose, which is essentially already in your official plan, but was not implemented in the zoning bylaw. So we spent quite a bit of time looking at these setbacks and determining whether they work, and they do. And in the end, when these setbacks are applied to the smallest parcel, which is 10 hectares, they do provide for an appropriately sized building envelope that still allows for some flexibility for a proponent to develop their use. In addition, we've differentiated between facilities that are considered to be micro-processing or micro-cultivation in nature. These are very small cultivation facilities, and in those cases, the setbacks are less in recognition of the smaller impact or lesser impact that they have on adjacent land uses. The last section in the bylaw basically says, includes provisions that permit indoor cannabis related uses in the M2 zone, and then the standards in the M2 zone basically apply in that kind of circumstance. What the bylaw doesn't do, and this is the last item I wanted to talk about, is it does not zone the existing CanTrust or Redican facilities in the town. These two facilities were permitted and are certainly legal in accordance with the town's current zoning bylaw. Once the zoning bylaw comes into effect, both of these uses would not be recognized in that bylaw. In other words, they would not be placed in one of the two new zones that I'm recommending in this bylaw, which means that they become legal non-conforming uses and are therefore protected under the Planning Act, and they are allowed to continue for as long as they want to continue into the future. However, given that they would be legal non-conforming uses, if they wished to expand the footprint of their operations in the future, they would be permitted to do so, but only after they have applied to expand a legal non-conforming use with such an application being heard by the Committee of Adjustment. And your official plan already includes a number of policies to provide guidance to the Committee of Adjustment in such a circumstance. And I am sure that many of the policies within the OPA that I am recommending would also be considered by the committee at that time. And lastly, there is a third facility in the town that is within the Niagara Escarpment planning area. While the OPA does apply to this area, there is no zoning in that area. So the zoning bylaw that I'm recommending does not apply to that area because, well, zoning just doesn't apply, and instead there's a development permit process. So that third operation doesn't have legal non-conforming status as the other two do because it's not subject to your zoning bylaw. In summary, and in closing, I'm very confident that these instruments being presented to you this evening for consideration represent good planning. They reflect an appropriate balance between the desire to allow these uses in appropriate locations and while protecting the public interest, and certainly reflective of the concerns, the many concerns that have been expressed by the public throughout this process and obviously before. It is my opinion that the amendments are consistent with the provincial policy statement. They conform to the Niagara Region official plan, and they really do, in my mind, reflect good planning. And obviously, obtaining the support of Niagara Region is very helpful to this process. I believe that a number of other municipalities may follow and copy what the town does, and I think that's a good thing based on their circumstances. So with that being said, might have been a little longer than I had intended, but us planners have trouble being short sometimes in how we present things, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments this evening. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald, for that presentation. I now turn to council. Is there any councillors that would like questions for Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Mayor, do you want the recommendation presented first?
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
So just as a matter of procedure, before the deliberations begin, on a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Whereas on September 10th, 2019, the town held a public meeting pursuant to Clause 1715D and Subclause 3412A2 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, for the purpose of giving the public an opportunity to make representations in respect of a proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for cannabis-related uses. And whereas Council has considered the modifications which have been made to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment following the public meeting, and whereas Council has, pursuant to Section 3417 of the Planning Act, determined that no further notice is required to be given in respect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, be it now resolved that Council receive the delegation materials from Tim Nohara, Chair of the Cannabis Control Committee, for information, and that the recommendation letter July 6, 2020, together with the Regulating Cannabis in the Town of Pelham Addendum Report July 5, 2020, prepared by Meridian Planning Consultants, be received, and that Council consider the adoption of the final official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendments appended thereto. So now for discussion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, now we will go back to council. Any discussion on the presentation? Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, thank you very much for the presentation. Just a quick question. Does the OPA ZPA provide requirements for those that grow cannabis, so that the personal use end of things, so the 4 plants per residence, is there any tie in there?
No, it does not deal with that at all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hildebrand.
This is really a combined question through you, Mr. Mayor, to our Director of Planning, because the consultant has listed a large number of studies that are required. And obviously our planning department is going to be required to obtain qualified consultants or review qualified consultants. And are those consultants available in Ontario to do that type of work?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. So as Nick McDonald indicated, there are a number of studies that are required when you submit a zoning bylaw amendment application. And the important ones for cannabis are the emission dispersion and modeling summary reports, the light mitigation, and traffic impact. All of those studies would be required certain types of professional engineering expertise to undertake and complete. And certainly there are consultants in Southern Ontario that do this type of work. And so there are consultants that could do it, and there are consultants that town could retain to do peer review of that work to ensure that it meets the requirements and the intent of the OPA policy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Director. Any other questions from councillors? Okay, I don't see any other questions or any other questions from the councillors, Madam Clerk.
So the vote on the motion then? Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda was the reorganized bylaws with regard to the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw. So on a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 4251-2020, being a bylaw to adopt an amendment to the official plan for the Town of Pelham Planning Area, Amendment Number 09, provision for indoor cannabis and industrial hemp cultivation. And bylaw 4252-2020, being a bylaw passed pursuant to the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended, to amend the Town of Pelham zoning bylaw 1136-1987, as otherwise amended, to establish provisions that apply to cannabis-related uses and industrial hemp-related uses in the Town of Pelham. If you wish to call for discussion on the bylaws.
Any discussion on the bylaws just read out by Madam Clerk? Not seen any, Madam.
So I will call for the recorded vote. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. So, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the COVID-19 update from the Director of Recreation, Culture, and Wellness.
Wait, so I'm sorry. So now that we're at the end of this, before we move on, I just, on behalf of council, Tim, we thank you for the the time of life that you have donated to this. I'm pretty sure that yourself and the other members of your committee at no time thought that you were going to be involved in this for so long, and with the number of hours that it took to throw this together. But obviously, it was worth it. We've got a bylaw that is both defensible and protects the rights of the citizens, while at the same time allowing the industry their rights. So on behalf of the council, we definitely want to thank you and your committee members for the time that you have taken here, put in this. And Mr. McDonald, on behalf of the council, we also thank you and your time you worked with the committee, and we thank you also. Do you have any final words, Tim?
I'm very grateful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council, for trusting us with this, staff for supporting us. They were at every meeting in multiples. Nick, you've been a pleasure to work with. I hope this isn't the very, very end. And then to my fellow members who I know, geez, there's at least 60 people watching. They all send their thanks. I'll speak on behalf of them. And I'm sure somebody dear to all of us, Big Mike, I'll quote you, Mr. Mayor, is very pleased this evening. So thank you, and we'll let you get on with the rest of your business.
Councilor Hill, I see Councilor Hildebrand, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd also like to make a comment. I'd like to thank all of the town staff, the regional staff, NPDC, Airden Bliss, and obviously Nick and Meridian Planning, and Tim and his committee members. I looked up the number of meetings this committee has had. The next meeting is in July. That would be the 40th meeting. Of generally at least 12 people showing up there. And I looked at when the original interim control bylaw was put in October 2018. I looked at the man hours in combined that have been expended on this. It has to be at least 2 full-time people in terms of man hours that have been put into all this work. It's just been I'm a last minute addition to this committee, and it's been such a pleasure. And I just want to thank everyone for all the hard work they put in. It's amazing. We're so thankful.
Thanks so much, Bob, on behalf of everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. So we will move on to the agenda. Thanks again, everyone. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the update from the Director of Recreation, Culture and Wellness with regard to COVID-19.
Okay. Ms. Vicky, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's been an exciting week for Pelham and a lot of firsts. On Monday, we opened the Pelham pool. As well as Monday, we started summer camps, the first week of 9 weeks. And on Wednesday, we opened the Doulaban ice surface. And all of it was according to approved operating procedures from the public health, as well as our EOC committee. What's common about all three activities or events is it's a new way of operating. You can't just show up. You either have to register, or you have to reserve a space or reserve a swim time to be able to participate. And obviously our advertising has worked because that was seamless. All of the activities, everyone was pre-screened before entering the facility, and we had full cooperation from all participants. I'll just give you an update on all three. The aquatics program, as you know, we began to offer group lessons, private lessons and semi-private lessons, lane swims, aqua Zumba, and family swims. And I'm pleased to let you know that we had a total of 171 people for family swims this week. We had our swimming lessons were very busy, and we have privates, semi-privates, lane swims are booked the whole summer. And so our Aqua Zumba classes are filled the full summer. So that's really encouraging. With regard to the summer camp, this week we had 2 groups. No, I'm sorry, the first week, that was last week, we had 2 groups. This week we have expanded to 3 groups, and we have a full bike camp. Next week we already have 4 groups pre-registered, and we have phone calls every day. So I'm encouraged that the camps will all be filled. And so far we've had no complaints, and the program has run very smoothly. With regard to ice rentals, on Wednesday we opened our ice, allowing 10 people on each rental. Basically, it's a skills program. Every program is skills to either hockey, figure skating, and back to back. We are booked the Dulaban Arena from 7 in the morning until 9 at night. Basically between 11 and 14 hours a day already. And just looking at our the demand across the region, and we still have at least a 50% commitment if we had an additional ice surface. Just to let council know, we worked on our business case to open up the second ice surface. We have the net revenue in operating the Dulaban Arena from July the 8th will generate approximately $39,000 until September 7th, and it's fully booked. If we opened the exhibitor arena beginning on July the 27th, we could up till September 7th, of course, and then the fall would come in place. We would have an additional net revenue of $57,000. So that's approximately $96,000. And this is all based on a very high demand for ice in the Niagara region. There's only 3 arenas that are open. And I have to say that we were very excited to implement our new ice making equipment, and we were anxious to hear how the players felt about the ice. And we have a couple of coaches that have traveled across the region and outside the region, and they commented that our ice is excellent, and they had no complaints. So that was very, very exciting. So basically, there is economies of scale that the second arena, since the town is only adding 1 facility, we only need 1 additional facility support position to open the second pad. We have enough staff based on the first arena, and with the second facility support position, we basically could achieve this. And I just want to keep in mind that is not including rentals of anything else, of the gymnasiums, of the halls. So that's a different phase, different stage. We're only talking about where we are now and continuing on with the second ice pad. And that's basically my update. If you have any questions?
So before I turn it over to council, Vicky, so even though the new COVID restrictions are in effect, and they are only allowing, I believe, 10 people at a time on the ice, we haven't lowered our ice rental fees at all, have we?
No.
Okay, and
No,
what,
our ice rental fees are according to our fees and charges that were approved with the budget.
excellent. And and you're quite confident that with a little bit of advertising that we will be able to, if not 100%, get up into the 85-90% range of ice usage if we open that second arena?
Most definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. I know it's whenever I listen in on the EOC meetings, Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays, it's always right from the time that this town has started opening up and the province has allowed us to open up. We have been right on the front curve. We're probably one of the municipalities. One of the few municipalities are running day camps. We've got the ice arena, ice surface going. It is, for the community our size, we're really pushing the limits. And the fact that your programs are completely, if not 100% full, but are being so well received in the community, just goes to show that the residents want to get out there and they want to resume their lives with precautions, and they're willing to do it. And I think that you and your staff got to be commended to be right up on the curve, listening to the health unit, doing what's safe, but at the same time opening up the facilities for us. It's thank you for that. And now I will any answers, comments from councillors. Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to share with everyone what Vicky was talking about with the new technology. That's the cold water ice flooding. That's where our technology was allowing us to go from 140-degree water and flooding down to cold water, which is basically 70 degrees.
Yeah.
And she's right. I did check with we have some elite hockey school directors that are using the ice. The ice is clear and it's hard. So we're quite impressed. And because I know that the ice surfaces are in demand and there's only 3 available in the area, I think it's an excellent plan. I normally wouldn't add an extra ice pad at this time of year, but I think in this, because the demand is there, I would be in favor of opening up the next arena. Thank you for an excellent report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other councillors? Councillor Hahn?
Through the mayor, thanks, Vicky. So I'm just scribbling down as quickly as I could when you were throwing out some numbers there. So the 57,000 was for the accipiter from July 27th to December 7th. Was that including the cost to start it up and originally put the ice in the first place?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we figured on the hydro based on our past hydro for the same months. Basically, yeah, we figured on the hydro as well.
So that's just, we're talking, that's profit then. You've taken out
Correct.
your expenses of your staff expenses and everything else has been
Correct.
taken out of that. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I'll turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from V. Van Ravensway, Director of Recreation, Culture and Wellness, for information. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur. Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion is approved unanimously. The next item is the update from the Community Emergency Management Coordinator, Fire Chief Limburger.
Okay, Fire Chief, you're on.
Mayor, council, senior leadership, and everybody else that's joined in. Some COVID updates in Pelham. We have had 36 cases total. Currently, we have 0 active cases in the town. We joined 4 other municipalities that have 0 cases within the region. Niagara is at 779 cases. We had 1 new case today. 690 of those are resolved, and we have 64 deaths. Ontario, 36,839, with 32,663 of those resolved, which is a very, very good number. Across the country, we're at 108,000 cases, with about approximately 72,000 of those resolved. Our case doubling time is sitting around 250 days. Our reproduction rate has increased slightly to 1.10. As far as our institutions go, we do have 3 outbreaks in institutions. We have 27 institution outbreaks that have been resolved. Most cases are home isolation. About 84% of all cases are as such at home. They're primarily between 25 and 29-year-olds and 85-year-old and plus. As far as infection rates, 60% female, 40% males. As of today, the province has tested approximately 1.7 million people. As far as testing or screening goes, as the director of recreation had stated, they have a number of activities going on in the town: pools, camps, ice rentals. We have active screening taking place at the MCC, town hall, at the fire halls, at Tice Road operations, and at the pool. The region, as far as issues going, we are having problems across the region with the beaches, as indicated just earlier, that one of the primary groups of infection are between 25 and 29-year-olds. We have a real issue with the beaches being overcrowded and the younger crowds not paying attention to the physical distancing. So you might just hear you might just see some of these beaches being shut down because of the lack of interest to the guidelines. Our EOC group, we have been meeting for Monday, Wednesday, Friday for quite some time now. Starting this week, we've reduced that. We're meeting Mondays and Thursdays. The province has extended the declaration until July the 22nd. And then today, the province announced that they will be allowing some regions to move to stage 3. Actually, 29 of 34 regions in the province. Unfortunately, the Golden Horseshoe, Niagara, being part of it, will not be allowed to go to stage 3. Will remain in stage 2 until our numbers improve. So if you're looking for any information as far as what is entailed in that stage 3 opening, you can go on to the Ontario COVID website, and all that information is available. So, and some of the things that they're indicating when you do go to stage 3 is that they're going to increase the indoor numbers, the outdoor numbers. They're going to start allow indoor restaurants, bars, gyms. The casinos will start to open up, but all of them with very tight restrictions. So I would anticipate within the next couple of weeks, we in Niagara, if we continue on the trend we're at, we will get to stage 3 probably within the next 2 weeks. And that's about the end of my report.
Thank you, Fire Chief. I'll ask any members of council if they have questions or comments on his report. Not seeing any, I will turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on a motion by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Wink, be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from the Lymburner Fire Chief and Community Emergency Management Coordinator for information. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion is passed unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the Corporate Administration COVID-19 update by CAO Cripps.
And Mr. CAO, you have the floor.
I'll be brief this evening, Council. This is fundamentally a placeholder to make sure that every week or every meeting you have an opportunity to ask questions about our response to coronavirus and its impact on operations. I'd just like to highlight Ms. Quinlan's group, although she didn't specifically need to speak this evening, did yeoman's work over the past week putting together the business case and doing the analysis to support Ms. Van Ravensway and her teams being able to propose in a confident manner that we can open the second ice pad, which is to say the Occipital Arena. So certainly I want to tip my hat to the corporate services team for some good analysis. I can confirm that the openings have gone extremely well. You know, that's been the focus for about 3 weeks corporately on how to open safely, producing all the document and the procedures and the safety pieces around that. We've got positive feedback from the public and from staff. I think everyone actually appreciates being asked the questions, being screened. It really does a lot to reassure beyond all of the enhanced cleaning procedures. So openings have gone well. I'm unaware of a single complaint with respect to how we're handling that and the mechanisms and the requirements to enter our facilities. We're happy to present that business case, and we'll be happy to proceed. We're going to start within days now to actually get the ice ready. And be making a lot of positive phone calls tomorrow, I would imagine, to interested parties. So you're going to have a lot of happy people. And I just want to thank you for all of that and say I'm very proud of how well this team's pulling together. We are the only municipality out of 13 in Niagara to offer. We're the only one that's doing kids camps and pool full aquatics and ice. There are a couple that are doing, there's 3 that are doing kids camp, there's a couple that are doing a few things. We're the only one to have all 3. So very proud of this team that's come together to do this. Which the community deserves, no less, frankly. But it's a good time right now for Pelham. That's what I've got, subject to questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. CAO. Any comments or questions from any councillors? Not seeing any. I'll return to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on a motion by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Stewart, be it resolved that Council receive the COVID-19 update presentation from D. Cribbs, Chief Administrative Officer, for information. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Members of Council, the next item on the agenda is the Pelham Active Transportation Committee with regard to the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Grant. I see Ms. Clark has joined the Zoom meeting.
Okay. Ms. Clark, you're on. Oh, we can't hear you.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Well, I think you'll agree that over the last few months, last few months have certainly reinforced the value of trails, sidewalks, and safe roadways in Pelham, with more residents than ever walking and cycling in our town to maintain their physical and mental health through some very challenging times. We've all been taking advantage of these resources, and believe me, we appreciate them very much. I know I do. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Pelham Active Transportation Committee, whose members include Brian Beatty, Reese Evans, Bob Fish, Lisa Gallant, Dave Nicholson, and Barbara Ribiak. These are all citizen volunteers on the committee. We're also joined by Councillor John Wink and Regional Councillor Diana Houston. Jason Marr, the Director of Public Works, and his staff support us, and we appreciate that support very much. I'm here tonight on behalf of the committee to do 2 things. Number 1, to urge council to use the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Grant, which was awarded to the town of Pelham in 2017. And secondly, to recommend to council that it be used for the paving of the Steve Bauer Trail from Port Robinson Road to the Pelham boundary. We think this option of the 4 available to us is the most practical, affordable, and would benefit the most residents. I'd like to just give you a brief history on this grant because it's had some twists and turns, as you probably know, but just in case, I thought it would be important to review that for you quickly. The grant was actually announced as part of a 3-year funding program by the provincial government in 2017. It was part of a larger initiative called Cycle Ontario, which was designed to increase the cycling capacity in municipalities and communities throughout the province. We were very fortunate in that we had a lot of good information to use in the preparation of a proposal, working with town staff. We used the Active Transportation Master Plan, which had been recently approved. We used input from residents, which we had gathered over the years from the variety of events that the Pelham Active Transportation Committee participates in, such as the Farmers Market, Summerfest, the Home Show, and other events, from emails and comments and information that residents had forwarded to us, and just from our own knowledge of what was happening in our community. At that time, we were asked to submit a 3-year proposal. In other words, funding would be available to us for a 3-year period, and we had to ensure that we, in fact, received approval for year 1, because if we didn't, then we couldn't access the grant in years 2 and 3. So it was very important that we do a good job, and we did. We were one of 5 municipalities in Niagara that received this grant, and in addition to the region. Well, we received the grant. We received $60,000 to proceed with the year 1 project, which at that time was the signage project, and we planned to initiate that in 2017 with stakeholder consultations and a variety of other activities. And we also wanted it to coincide with some of the plans that the region had. But no sooner did we have an election in June and the provincial government changed, and the newly elected government canceled this program, canceled the cycling strategy for the province. And we knew that that was it. We were no longer eligible for any additional funds. The government was good enough, though, to indicate that we would receive the money that was initially approved, the $60,000, and in fact increased that to $75,000, just over $75,000. And they indicated that just as when we applied for this grant, we needed to use it within a certain amount of time, and in this case they said December 31st, 2020, and that the town had to contribute 20% towards the overall cost of the project. Given these changes, and of course we were now working with a new council, with all of you, and you were dealing with a lot of other issues, it was your decision to postpone the use of these funds for a year. In the meantime, you asked us, and through the Director of Public Works, we were asked to review the 4 options that the government provided to us based on the original proposal that we had submitted to the province. I mean, the good news is, quite honestly, the Active Transportation Committee wanted all 4 of these projects to be completed. So, I mean, if you can agree to all 4 and make them all happen, you know, we'd be that much happier, because we know all 4 projects meet a need in the community. However, we know that there are some serious considerations with respect to all 4 of these, and some were intended to be more minor in scope and cost, and others were more major. So at the time that we were asked to review the 4 options available to us, we undertook an analysis, again, reviewing the Active Transportation Master Plan, reviewing all the feedback that we had received from residents and the information that we had, and we reviewed each of these projects. And so the signage project was still a good idea. We still wanted to see that completed, but there were a couple of things holding us back in recommending this one. And that is, number 1, we didn't have the time to conduct the community consultations that were required to properly assign the routes and make some determinations about that. And secondly, the region, we knew, was going to undertake an extensive project to develop consistent signage, wayfinding signage, for the regional routes, cycling routes and trails and so on, and they were going to invite municipalities to participate in that. And we didn't want to be out of sync with that regional initiative. So for that reason, even though this project was affordable, we knew we couldn't complete the consultations required, and we didn't want to be out of step with the region. And for that reason, we decided not to recommend this project. The second project in year 2, originally conceived as a year 2 project, was the paving of the Steve Bauer Trail from Port Robinson Road to the Pelham boundary, essentially Quaker Road. This is a heavily used section of the Steve Bauer Trail. If you take a look at this trail at any time, you'll see pedestrians and cyclists using this trail. It's especially well used, as you know, and now especially so because it links the residents from the boundary, that end of Pelham, with all of the East Fonthill amenities, including the Meridian Community Center. And we know that it creates a better and safer commuter cycling route for all of those people who are traveling to Niagara College, perhaps traveling to work in Welland or other communities, and those who are also trying to link with the recreational trails available in Welland and the Greater Niagara Circle route. We've had a lot of support for the paving of this trail, not just from cyclists, but also from pedestrians, from seniors particularly, and from those who use mobility devices. The Steve Bauer Trail, when we're out in the community, residents tell us they love the Steve Bauer Trail, all sections, all aspects of it. However, there aren't any sections of it that are paved. And so when we've spoken to residents, they have indicated that this would be the ideal section to pave because it would allow people who need and require some sort of assistive device to use a trail that's beautiful with the trees and the ambiance. So this project, we thought, was often requested, would appeal to cyclists, pedestrians, seniors, those who use assistive devices. It provides good linkages between that side of Fonthill and all of the new amenities in East Fonthill. We thought it was affordable based on the information that we had from the director, and also that it would benefit the greatest number of residents. It could be completed by December 31st, 2020, and that's what we based our recommendation on. There were two other projects that, again, we still want to see through to completion at some point, we hope. Project number 3 was the paving of the spur line from Rice Road to Station Street, connecting ultimately to the paved trail that Thorold is proposing for the remainder of that spur line. They have the majority of it in their municipality. It'll be quite expensive for them, but they're working towards that using development charges and so on, and they hope to complete that at some point in the near future. It would be great if we could complete that section as well, but two things held us back from recommending this option. Number one, the cost. We knew it was more expensive, and that wasn't probably feasible this year, and we also knew it could not be completed by the end of December. And then finally, Canberra Road cycling improvements. These have certainly been requested by cyclists and others in the town of Pelham. We know that Canberra Road is an important link between Fenwick and Fonthill, and many cyclists use it for sure. And it's certainly the configuration currently isn't conducive to cyclists. However, this was quite an extensive project as we had scoped it out for the original proposal. It included widening the road, removing the rumble strips, paving the shoulders, and creating sharrows for commuter cyclists and recreational cyclists. So because this project requires extensive road work, and the fact that simply removing the rumble strips will not improve the safety of the road for all road users, we felt that as desirable as this project was, and as often as residents had indicated their interest in this project, it was considerably more costly and it could not be completed before December 31st of 2020. And therefore, it wasn't feasible for action at this time. So in summary, here's my final pitch. The Active Transportation Committee is asking Council to please use the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Funds that were provided by the province of Ontario. Returning the funds, I believe, would not be wise. We are very concerned because given the current funding situation and the seriousness of other issues that municipalities and all levels of government must deal with, we're pretty sure that we're not going to see funding like this again for quite some time. We don't believe it's wise to return funds. I worked in the public sector for over 35 years and have some experience in this regard, and we'll just leave it at that. But finally, I would also say that all of the major infrastructure projects right now, the funding sources that both the provincial and federal governments are providing, all of them require municipalities to demonstrate their commitment to active transportation. And I think this would just be one more element that would allow the town of Pelham to do that. And then finally, the Active Transportation Committee is recommending that we pave the Steve Bauer Trail from Port Robinson Road to the Pelham boundary. We think this is a better and safer route for cyclists. We believe that it provides better access for vulnerable road users of all kinds, of all types, of all ages, and particularly so for those who use mobility devices of one type or another. We believe this option is affordable. We think it can be completed by December 31st, 2020. And we think it provides, we know it will provide desirable linkages within Pelham, within the town of Pelham, and to other communities such as the city of Welland. So I thank you for your attention and consideration, and I'm happy to clarify any points that I've made or answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark, for that in-depth history of the grant, perhaps. Perhaps before I open it to council, Director of Public Works, Jason, don't mean to put you on the spot. Do you any further comments to this, perhaps?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do echo the comments from Mrs. Clark and the Pelham Active Transportation Committee. There is a report that will be presented in front of council, I believe, after this presentation, with respect to the reconsideration of the paving of the Steve Bauer Trail between the south limit and Port Robinson Road, as well as some new financial numbers that council may be interested in discussing with respect to the paving of that project. So I think I'll leave the questions until that report.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Okay, so we open up to council. Any questions to Ms. Clark about her presentation? Councilor Wink.
B, thank you very much for your presentation. I think when this was brought to us before, we didn't really have the background with respect to the choices that were being made. I know a couple of the councilors wanted Canberra Road to be taken care of, but I think the numbers that you brought forward on what would be required to complete this, plus the fact that this money has to be spent by the end of this year, and really the only option that we can get this done is paving this Steve Bauer Trail. We don't want to turn our back to grant money. I think you've added a lot of information that council didn't have the last time, and I appreciate your presentation, and I hope for some reconsideration on behalf of council.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, I'd also like to thank, through you, Mr. Mayor, B. Clark, for her presentation. And I know from the director's report and the work that the director and I have been doing on the Steve Bauer Trail, I think there's been significant differences in the presentation that we're going to hear tonight on the next item. So thank you again for all your hard work and for your committee work. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions or comments? Not seen any. I'll turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to the delegation, on a motion by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Wink, be it resolved that Council receive the B. Clark Pelham Active Transportation Committee delegation for information. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
That motion is unanimously approved. Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda as amended is the Niagara 2021 Canada Games Legacy Project Public Works Report. It was agenda item 10.2.9.
So I'll ask the Director of Public Works to present this, please.
Okay, to you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So basically, Pelham has been awarded the cycling races for the 2021 Canada Games. which are to take place in August of next year. As part of, there was an agreement that was put in place with previous council and the Canada 2021 Games to host the event, and a memorandum of understanding was in place surrounding the agreement in principle. Part of that agreement was that the Canada 2021 Summer Games would provide the town with a grant in the order of $21,250 towards a project which was at that time was considered to be a trailer that would house equipment and cycling equipment that would help the event take place as part of the 2021 Summer Games and into the future for other cycling races. It was determined that this was probably not the best use of funds. The cycling community wasn't actually in favor of moving ahead with that. And so through discussions with the 2021 Canada Summer Games, they're still on board to offer a grant to the town of Pelham, but they're basically giving the town of Pelham the opportunity to put that money towards a legacy project that would service the community and promote active transportation within the town. These discussions have basically just resurfaced in the last few weeks, and staff thought that this was a great opportunity to again bring forward the Steve Bauer Trail paving project as one of those legacy projects that council could consider to use these funds towards. As part of our resurfacing and patching contract, we did include the trail as a provisional item in that tender. And the original estimate and budget for completing the trail, and not the full trail, only from the south limit to approximately 350, 400 meters north of Merritt Street, we estimated that to be the amount that we would that would expel our budget. After tendering the work as a provisional item, again, this is not something that we're committed to, the tender results came back significantly lower. So we're approximately 30% under our original budget. So this now gives us an opportunity with the competitive pricing that we received, with the OMCC commuter grant in the amount of just over $75,000, and with the new funding opportunity through the Canada Summer Games, our budget is upwards of $120,000. And staff believe that this is an opportunity that we can continue on and pave the full trail all the way from the south limit to Port Robinson Road. So this report is basically being presented to council tonight for consideration and using those funds towards the paving of the Steve Bauer Trail. One of the conditions as part of the grant from the Canada Summer Games is that the town needs to also contribute matching funds. So we have budgeted as part of the 2019 capital budget, which was red circled and deferred. We have those funds, those matching funds that the town is going to use towards the project. So the funding, the matching funds for the Canada 2021 Summer Games is in place, as well as our 20% funding requirement for the OMCC grant. So we believe that the funding is in place, that we're going to be able to successfully complete that project and pave the full length of the trail. And there may be still some opportunities with remaining budget to put some type of signing, paying recognition to the funding sponsors and create a legacy project for the town of Pelham. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Director, for your report. And I will now ask if there's any councillors with questions. I see Councillor Hildebrand. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor, we have to read the motion first. My mistake. We have to go to the clerk.
Members of Council, through you, Mr. Mayor, on a motion by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0101 and that Council direct staff to revise the current Memorandum of Understanding with the 2021 Canada Games Committee to allow the $21,250 excluding HST legacy project funding to include the hard surfacing of Steve Bauer Trail between 1106 Line Avenue and Port Robinson Road, and that Council approve the use of the OMCC grant in the amount of $75,416, excluding HST, to complete the hard surfacing of the Steve Bauer Trail between 1106 Line Avenue and Port Robinson Road, and that Council approve $24,584, again excluding HST, of expenditure from the 2019 capital budget Red Circle project to complete the hard surfacing of the Steve Bauer Trail between 1106 Line Avenue and Port Robinson Road. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And now we will turn to Council, and we will turn to Councillor Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the Director of Public Works for this report. Obviously, you realized last time I had basically three issues. One was funding, two was paving the complete trail, and three was rumble strips, which we haven't really talked much about. So obviously, I just want you to confirm that you've addressed the funding and paving the complete trail. And the third issue is, what is your plan on the rumble strips? Because here's my concern is, we do have this cycling race coming up. And the peloton, which will be using Canberra Road to Effingham, are a large group of cyclists. And they definitely will use every part of pavement. Right now, there's really no indication that we have these rumble strips. I really do consider that a big safety issue, especially for something that is important as the cycling race. I know it's important for the local cyclists, but these are cyclists that are going to try and take every advantage they can down that road. So if you could comment on these three issues for me, I'd sure appreciate it.
Sure. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that we did receive competitive pricing when we tendered the work. So as it stands right now with the OMCC grant, as well as the Canada 2021 Summer Games grant, in addition to the town's commitment of $24,584, that we will have sufficient budget to complete the paving of the entire trail from the south limit to Port Robinson Road. So that's the budgeting end of things, you know, taking advantage of good competitive pricing on the works that we tendered. With respect to the rumble strips, we have been in consultation. As part of this report, I've included the cycle route. Canberra Road is on the route, the race route. In speaking with the Canada Summer Games, their race organizers have went through the course. They are satisfied with the race route. Town will work with our operations crews to take care of any potholes and patching that may be required ahead of the race. But in general, the race organizers were okay and they acceptable with the route that was that they've chosen. With respect to the rumble strips, I believe in listening to Mrs. Clark's presentation, that the improvements that they're looking at doing along Canberra Road to safely allow cyclists and pedestrians to use that roadway is much more significant than removal of rumble strips. That's where the cost would get very high when you start to widen roads and build up shoulders. I have talked to the industry with respect to what pricing and what it would cost to mill out the rumble strips and repave them, so to remove the rumble strip. So that estimate is somewhere in the order of $40,000 to $50,000 to complete that work. I don't think that would be able to be supported under the 2020 patching contract, but absolutely, staff would be more than willing to come back with a line item in the budget that would take care of the rumble strip project removal replacement as part of a 2021 capital budget or a future budget. Again, I believe that there would be some more discussion that would need to take place with respect to the Active Transportation Committee to see what the scope of work would entail and what they're kind of looking at getting done there on Canberra Road to make it safe for all road users. But the removal and replacement of the rumble strips would be in the order of $40,000 to $50,000.
Thank you.
Councillor? Does that answer your questions, Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments on either either report? Not seen any. I'll turn to the clerk.
So for the vote on this agenda item, Councillor Hahn,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand,
Yes.
Councillor Kaur,
Yes.
Councillor Stewart,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Mr. Mayor, I believe the next item on the agenda is the approval of the regular and special council minutes of June the 15th. I have a motion by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. C11-2020, regular council minutes of June 15th, 2020, and SC10 2020, special council meeting also of June 15th, 2020.
Okay.
If you would like to call for errors or omissions.
Yes. After viewing these minutes, has any councillor found any comments to make or omissions to be fixed? Not seen any. I'll return to the clerk.
So for the approval of the minutes, Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Carried unanimously. Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is a request to lift consent agenda items for separate consideration.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that first or not?
So you would ask
Yep.
if there are any members of
Okay.
council who wish to lift any items.
Any members of council that wish to raise an item? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes, I'd like to lift item 8.3.1.
Yes? That's it?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors? Not seen any. I'll return to the clerk.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, on a motion by Councillor Hahn and seconded by Councillor Stewart, be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the July 13th, 2020 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable, and that would be save and accept item 8.3.1, which has been lifted. Are there any comments from members of council on any of the items? That doesn't need a new motion.
Okay.
Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
And Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Carried. And Mayor Junkin, we will turn now to the staff reports of a routine nature. The one that was lifted, update on pedestrian safety when crossing Pelham Street at Church Hill. And Councillor Hildebrand lifted that for separate consideration.
Okay, and Councillor Hildebrand, your comments on this?
Yes, I'd like to refer item 8.3.1 back to staff for a staff report in September.
Okay. Any comments from any councillors on this? No. Madam Clerk?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, you have a motion to refer report 8.3.1 back to staff for additional information to come back. I need a seconder on that motion. Councillor Kaur. And is there discussion on the motion to refer back to staff?
I was wondering perhaps, Councillor, if you could be a little more specific on what the more information would be?
Yes, through a review with our Public Works Director, we've come to the conclusion that more review by staff needs to be done on this report. And if the Public Works Director would like to make a comment to that effect, I think that would be the appropriate action for this item.
Director of Public Works?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. There's additional information and studies that we want to consider as part of this report, and any recommendations that staff may make to council moving forward with the pedestrian signal there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from councillors? Not seeing any, and we turn to the clerk.
So this is a motion by Councillors Hildebrand and Kaur to refer this this report back to staff for additional information, and that staff will report back at a future council meeting. And I'm sorry, Councillor, did you have a date in mind that you wish to see that by?
It would be a date in September, near the end of September.
Okay. So by the end of September?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and so I will call for the vote. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
And that motion carries unanimously. Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is item 10.2.1 nuisance bylaw, report 2020-0083 from the Fire Department. I have a motion by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2020-0083 and that Council consider approving the nuisance bylaw, which is listed on the agenda for this evening.
Yeah. Thank you. Any comments or questions on this motion from any council members? Is the fire chief still with us?
Yes.
Oh, hey, Chief, I was wondering if you could inform us the difference or what changes were made to upgrade this bylaw.
Through Mr. Mayor, the nuisance bylaw that was, or it still is in effect, I guess, until this one, if this one is approved, was written many, many years ago, and the language in it, a lot of it doesn't apply today. It was more around, it just doesn't apply today. So that we rewrote it to, and it focused around noise, parties, roof parties, just general things that occur here or elsewhere in the region that we deal with on a regular basis. It's just that most of the things in the old bylaw don't. It was back in the day when the horse and buggy was on this. So,
okay. So I guess all I'm asking is, so nothing ground shaking, no ground shaking changes, just like you say, an update on the languages then.
Yeah, most of it, through Mr. Mayor, most of it was around that, and some in the things that occur now and that have evolved in the new generation of mainly around congregating group parties, drinking on the streets, gathering on rooftops and homes and drinking in the public and doing other things that aren't very, very nice.
Okay. Will this impact staff meetings at all? You don't have to answer that. Okay, thank you. I'll return to the clerk.
Councillor Hahn. I'm calling for the vote. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Carried unanimously. The next item is also for the fire chief, private entry onto lands bylaw of 2020, also on tonight's agenda. This is for the report, moved by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that council receive report 2020-0102 and recommend to council that the private entry onto adjacent lands bylaw be considered for council approval. I'll open it to you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay. Any questions, comments from councillors? See, Councillor Corr.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor. If the chief could just explain to me or to the rest of the council, what does that imply? Like, if someone wanted to put a pool in their backyard, does that allow the adjacent property or to take a fence down and bring a truck through the back? I don't get most of it. So if you could just explain it more detailed.
Through Mr. Mayor, it's for maintenance and repair or to address orders from the building department or property standards. So if someone had to repair something or make adjustments to something, a structure that's already existing, to keep the town out of that, this would give the neighbor the ability to go on to that through a process, getting permission and explaining what's going on to the neighbor. And if there's a breakdown and the neighbor doesn't allow this person to come on his property to repair his fence or his retaining wall or whatever, then it becomes a civil matter and it takes it away from the town and we don't get involved. They don't come to us looking us to resolve the situation. So it's a way of it gives our residents the ability to address issues between neighbors. I think maybe the CEO can give you the legal slant on this more than I can.
Mr. CAO?
So the town does have what I'll describe as a somewhat archaic entry onto lands bylaw. The creation of these is contemplated in the Municipal Act. They're fairly uncommon in rural municipalities. They're requirements in large urban ones, and typically as municipalities urbanize, they adopt these. It creates a system whereby neighbors, in a perfect world, of course, neighbors always get along. Good fences make for good neighbors, as the saying goes. People cooperate in the community. But as population increases, we know that that's decreasingly the case, and that people tend to have more formal interactions with each other. So the purpose of the bylaw is to create a system whereby neighbor A can inform with adequate warning neighbor B that they intend to what would otherwise be a trespass, but traverse their property to bring equipment or whatever that is, to build a pool, to fix their foundation, whatever that is, but to do some sort of work on their property. And then it obligates them to put it back to what it was. And if you read through the bylaw, failure to do so creates a right of action as between neighbor A and B to be made whole. We've set up the most common model for this is the one the town, your administration is suggesting to you, the one that keeps the town out of it, so that these remain private land disputes as between neighbors. And in a perfect world, you don't need to use this because neighbor A and neighbor B get along well. They've got a sense of community, and you understand that the fence needs to be taken down for them to get a backhoe in the back, and that they're going to pay to put the fence back up. But the ideal is not always what we experience in reality, of course. It's best to put a modern version of this with clarified rules in place so that hopefully we avoid future discord as between neighbors in the future. Typically the lot size is shrinking, of course, in all the new development we're approving. And now a 50-foot parcel is a fairly good sized piece of land. And 20 years ago, that would have been the smallest in the neighborhood, and you could have bought a 100-foot lot type of thing. So as those come down and buildings are closer together, it becomes more difficult to do outside work And the bylaws such as these are increasingly necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Corr?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CEO. So that's new construction also?
Well, I mean, it could be. I guess if you manage to find a vacant lot in an urban area, I mean, those do exist to an extent. You could also provide notice to an existing property owner under that you were going to traverse their lands. What really matters is you give someone fair warning. You have a chance to talk about that. And at the end of the day, assuming you do traverse the lands and destroy their flower bed or take down their fence or cause some sort of damage, you have to make that whole. You have to fix that. The reality is construction in urban areas can be difficult. I think we probably all understand that. This is to create a mechanism. It's not to take away anyone's property rights, but it's also to make sure that physical dense form and construction works. And which is why the Municipal Act contemplates this. We do have this bylaw, mind you, a very, I don't remember its year. You'll forgive me that. I want to say it was back in the 80s. At any rate, we do have a very old version of this on the books. We felt it was time to modernize it in light of our fairly rapidly growing population. And this seemed like an appropriate sort of housekeeping exercise, as it were.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any other questions? Any other councillors? We'll return to the clerk.
So members of council, just for clarity, this is just with regard to the report. The bylaw will be brought for consideration under the bylaws section. So again, I have a motion by Councillor Hildebrand and seconded by Councillor Stewart to receive the report and that the private entry onto adjacent lands be considered for council's approval. Councillor Hahn? Yes?
Yeah.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Corr?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
And Councillor Wink?
Yes.
Mayor Duncan?
Yes.
Unanimous approval. The motion is carried. The next item on the agenda is the Regional Request for Support on Diversity Initiative, 2020-0098, Chief Administrative Officer's Report. On a motion by Councillor Corr and seconded by Councillor Hildebrand, be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0098. And further, be it resolved that the Town of Pelham Council endorse the Niagara Region's application to join the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities in pursuit of the ultimate goal of making all of Niagara a community that is inclusive and supportive for all residents and guests. To you, Mr. Mayor, for questions.
Okay. Any comments, questions on this motion? No, Councillor Hahn.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as you're a regional councillor as well, can you just speak to this a little bit and just give kind of a lowdown on this particular initiative?
Yes, we had a council meeting, I believe in the June council meeting. We had probably about 15 representatives of the public make presentations to council about how they either had individually been subject to discrimination of one sort or the other, or how someone they had known had been subject to discrimination and not far away, but within the boundaries of the region. And after hearing their stories, we, I believe this was unanimously voted on the affirmative, that we would take this motion out to other municipalities of the region and just to reaffirm both Tier 1 and Tier 2 that we are diverse communities, and we will act accordingly, either by passing the appropriate bylaws or in hiring whatever going forward. We would be a diverse community and respect all races. That's basically what it's about. Any other questions, Councillor?
So further to that, then the 288,000 then is to hire a consultant then to develop programs.
Yes, that's true.
And that is just for a short period of time, though. It's for a limited period of time, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Aren't there already policies like this in place through human resources and the like?
Well, you would think so, and actually, in fact, there are. I guess this, this consultant will be, his primary job is to review policies at the region, especially at the region, hiring and what have you, to make sure that the provincial policies are being followed, and if the region does need to strengthen existing bylaws, practices, that those steps will be taken.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments from any councillors? Not seeing any. I'll return to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, for the vote. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is item 10.2.4, short-term accommodations. On a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand, be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0090 as it pertains to short-term accommodation policies and regulations, file AM 1218, and that Council declare the revisions made to the official plan as directed by Council at the June 1st, 2020 meeting to be minor in nature, and that no further public meeting is required, and that Council approve the amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaws, as well as the licensing bylaw for bed and breakfast establishments and short-term accommodations. Members of Council, those bylaws are presented with the bylaws later on the agenda. To you, Mr. Mayor, for comment.
And perhaps before we open this to council, I will ask the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens, perhaps to comment on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you have before you this evening the proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and licensing bylaw for short-term accommodation. We made further revisions to the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment based on council's direction at the June 1st council meeting. So within the official plan, the short-term accommodations are recognized and permitted within the downtown area, the downtown transitional area, and the agricultural areas, including the good general and specialty agriculture. So those are the prime changes made to the official plan. It also talks about these just being in single detached dwellings. Previously, there was consideration for short-term accommodation within other built forms, but that has been removed. So it's just in the single detached dwelling built form. The zoning bylaw amendment also provides for these permissions in the agricultural area, in the neighborhood commercial, general commercial, and the rural commercial area. So we are not zoning any of these in any of our residential zones, so that if anybody wants to do a short-term accommodation or a bed and breakfast, they would have to get a zoning bylaw amendment. There were 4 or 5 existing bed and breakfast that would become legal non-conforming uses, as opposed to specifically zoned for those. And we feel that's the better way to deal with them, because if they cease to operate, then they would come to an end, and anybody who would want to operate them again at that particular location would have to go through a zoning bylaw amendment process. So I think we have captured the changes that council was looking for in these documents, but I'm happy to answer any questions that council has. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weens. I'll now turn it to council. Any questions, comments for the director on the motion? I guess I'll have one. If there is an illegal non-conforming, if the owner sold and someone and the purchaser, will that new owner be able to continue on with the license as it is?
It quite frankly, it depends. If there has been no cessation in the operation and the previous owner operated it, a bed and breakfast, up until the time they sold it, and the new owner operates it from the time that they purchased it, then it would be allowed to continue. But if there is a cease in the operation, then no. The new owner would not be able to continue with operating a bed and breakfast.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll ask one more time just to be sure. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I return to the clerk.
Thank you. And once again, the specific bylaws are listed later on the agenda. On the report, Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is item 10.2.5 on a motion by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2020-92 as it pertains to the demolition of a barn at 855 20 Road, and that Council direct planning staff to include 788 20 Road on the register of the non-designated property situated in the municipality that is of cultural heritage value or interest that is being worked on by planning staff. Madam Director, is that the correct address? Is it 788 or 855?
I apologize. It should be 855.
Thank you. So members of council will take that to be 855.
Okay, any questions or comments on this motion? Okay, not seeing any. I will ask the clerk.
Thank you. On the report, Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda, recommendation report for site plan application 190 Canberra Road on a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2020-88 as it pertains to application file SP0219 for 190 Canberra Road, and that Council approve the bylaw attached hereto as Appendix A, authorizing the Mayor and Clerk to enter into the site plan agreement with DeHaan Homes on behalf of the town. The bylaw will be presented later on the agenda. To you, Mr. Mayor, for questions.
Okay. Any questions or comments on this motion from any councillor? Don't see any. We will return to the clerk.
Thank you. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda, 10.2.7, grant opportunity for a GIS asset management specialist. On a motion by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Hahn, be it resolved that Council receive and approve Report 2020-0097, Public Works, and that Council directs staff to apply for a grant opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program for a GIS asset management specialist, and that the Town of Pelham commits to conducting the following activities in its proposed project submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to advance the asset management program. Number 1, asset condition assessment on all core assets, such as roads, bridges, and culverts, water, wastewater, and stormwater management systems, and inventory existing core assets into specialized asset management software, and that the Town of Pelham commits $26,200 in its 2021 operating budget toward the cost of this initiative. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. So before opening up to council, I will ask Director of Public Works perhaps to comment on this. Director?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you're aware, the town is working towards putting together an asset management plan. There's several phases to this plan. The first phase was completed last year when we developed a policy surrounding our asset management program. Now we're working towards developing the second phase. And in the second phase, basically, the municipalities are required to complete an asset management plan that looks at levels of service, condition, and basically is a tool that staff will use towards making recommendations for future capital projects. In addition, with respect to funding, it's made clear that funding opportunities will be made available to municipalities that have detailed and robust asset management plans in place. So Public Works, as well as corporate services and planning, basically the whole team have been working at putting together an asset management plan. We are currently working with a firm who has developed a software package for us. Public Works is completing condition surveys on our assets. We recently completed a road condition survey, and that report will be coming to council within the next month with respect to the condition of our road network. We're legislated to complete biannual inspections on our major culverts and bridge structures. That is being completed this summer as well. As well as we undertake inspections and condition surveys of our water and wastewater infrastructure. And we try to rotate through on those inspections so that we cover off our network at least once every 3 years. So we are getting the data. The next phase is to take this data and enter it into a system and a software package that staff will be able to use to make better informed decisions on what capital projects and where we should spend our capital dollars in maintaining our assets. So the next phase of our asset management plan is due in the summer of 2021. And like I said, we're working on getting the data together. Our corporate services department has done a great job with respect to working with a firm who's developing a software package for us and getting that template in place. This position is an opportunity for the town because they understand, the FCM understands that there is a lot of pressure put on municipalities with respect to staffing and being able to get this done. Currently, we don't have a GIS specialist in-house, and by GIS is Geographical Information System, so it's a good way of saying it takes data and puts it in pictures for everybody to clearly see where you should be focusing your resources towards. So this position would be instrumental in assisting public works staff, corporate services, the whole corporation on developing that asset management plan and getting that plan up and running. A lot of the duties for this particular staff member would be to take our raw data and get it into the system that we developed with our software provider, so that we can bring reliable information to council when we're making our budget presentations, and to be good sound reasoning and with supportive data on capital spends. So this is a grant that's basically open until October of 2022. It's an open grant right now, and staff feel that this is a great opportunity to take advantage of this as soon as possible, so that we can be successful in phase 2 of our asset management plan. So with that, it's a good summary.
Okay, thank you for that summary, Jason. Any questions, comments? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works. I understand that you need an individual, a specialist for this GIS program. And the question I have is, obviously it's for a specific amount of time that the grant covers this individual for. And when does council get a report on the progress, or does it come at the end? And when is the term of the individual up, and how does council get informed of that process?
Mr. CAO, did you have your hand?
Assuming for sake of argument that you were to support this motion tonight, we'd be getting our application into FCM within the next week. Don't control their turnaround time. But assuming we're approved in the next, call it 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully less, then we'd start a hiring process. You're talking about 3 months away from having, in a good scenario, from having a human start to do this work. And it does have a deadline of next summer. So we're happy to provide you with updates on our work towards the asset management. It really is there's a statutory obligation to do this. So I don't want to make it sound as if there's a huge amount of choice in this. We are obligated to go forward with this exercise. Now, we want to, and we think it's a very good idea. But at any rate, there is legislation requiring us to do this, to be abundantly clear. And this is the only funding mechanism available to Canadian municipalities. When we say FCM, it's really, they've received money from the federal government, and they become the clearinghouse to essentially disperse it to communities across the country. So that's really, we're talking about federal government dollars here that FCM is distributing, and we're running the program. So certainly, council, if there's a specific date or time, if you'd like an update or progress report in maybe December, I think we're probably 3 months away from having someone on staff, and sure that we need a couple of months with him or her to have some sort of idea. We're always very happy to be accountable and to give you updates, but I don't think there'd be much to say until somewhere around the end of the year at any rate. And we do know we have a deadline of July next year. So
July 1st.
Thank you. So prior to July would be the quick answer, but in all seriousness, we'd be happy to give you an update when and as you please. I don't see there being much point before sometime in the winter, however.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor? Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes, basically it does, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure that there are reports at the end. I understand it takes a process. I understand it's an individual. I understand he has to enter data. And I just want to make sure at the end of the process, when the grant is over, that we understand that it is a temporary position. It isn't a full-time position, if I have that information correct.
You do have that information correct, sir. And the goal is to create a living, sort of breathing system that's going to allow, and far enough down the road, we mean to have it available to everyone. You should be able to live in this town, go to our website, click on your street and see how old the pavement is and the pipes, and have an idea when we're planning to replace those, or the sidewalk or the street lighting or town hall for that matter, all of those assets. So we certainly mean to make this a highly interoperable, interactive source of data to which everyone has access and will guide us in planning future capital needs and tax increases, right?
Thank you.
To get to those needs.
Okay, Councillor Kaur? You're on mute, sir.
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the CAO. So that means it would be a one-year contract when we hire this person? Or
yes, this is not meant to be a position for life. This is a limited duration contract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I'll return to the clerk.
So for the vote, oopsie, my mic. So for the vote, Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion is carried unanimously. Mr. Mayor, the next item, 10.2.8, on a motion by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2020-0081 and recommend that Council endorse the proposed landscaping improvements to permit staff to proceed with tendering the project for completion in the fall of 2020, and that Council instructs staff to look into the opportunity to include the grant funding received through the 2020 PRIP program for tree planting and trail enhancements along Rice Road, Regional Road 50, adjacent to the paved multi-use trail, and develop one single landscaping tender in order to gain economies of scale. And this is for the Public Realm Investment Program grant for Rice Road and Port Robinson Road. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Again, before we turn it to council, perhaps the Director of Public Works would like to make a few comments. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a project that was brought in front of council previously. The direction given to staff at that time was to go back, have the beautification committee endorse the project prior to proceeding forward with it. So staff have done that. We've met with the beautification committee. They're in support of the project. Just a summary on the project. There are two projects that we've received funding for. The PRIP is a public realm improvement program that's offered through the region, and they offer up to $100,000 contribution towards projects that basically enhance active transportation and beautification adjacent to their regional roads. So Rice Road being Highway 20 and Rice Road being regional roads. That's where these projects focus on. There was prior grants that were given to the town of Pelham for some benches in and around the stormwater management pond at Rice Road and Highway 20. And then subsequent grant funding was provided towards a landscaping feature at the intersection of Rice Road and Port Robinson Road. And that information, I think, is provided as part of the appendice in the report. The third grant is, again, through the PRIP funding through the region, was for planting of trees and the installation of some benches along the multi-use path, which runs adjacent to Rice Road, basically from just south of Port Robinson Road north to the stormwater management pond. So the funding that is being provided by the region is for 50%. So the town needs to contribute 50% of the funding. We do have, as part of our 2020 capital budget, we do have a project that includes for our share of the funding, which is $12,000 for each project, for a total of $24,000 for both the benches to be installed in and around the stormwater management pond and the landscaping feature at Rice Road and Highway 20. And then we also have matching funds as part of our tree planting program in our operating budget for our 50% share of the cost with respect to the tree planting program. So the idea is that we would, if we're given the go-ahead by council, that staff will work on putting together a landscaping beautification tender, which would include benches in and around the stormwater management pond, Rice Road and Highway 20. It would include the landscaping feature that's shown as an appendix to this report at the corner of Rice Road and Port Robinson Road. And it would include for some planting of some trees along the multi-use trail adjacent to Rice Road between Port Robinson Road and the Highway 20.
Thank you for that rundown, Director. Jason, any comments, questions for the Director on these grants? Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works. I understand the plan for the landscaping plan and all those kind of details. My concern always is the maintenance and the operation of the stormwater pond and all the vegetation around it. Do they consider the upkeep and the maintenance when they're performing a landscaping design? And that the fact that if water is retained in these ponds, it presents an issue for the residents?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this, the landscaping features that are being presented are totally different than a stormwater management pond construction or maintenance of that pond itself. The ponds are used, they're usually engineered, and they function as a stormwater retention pond, as well. The pond at Rice Road and Highway 20 specifically has planting materials that are native to the area, and special considerations with respect to cooling and cleaning that water for the headwaters of a 12-mile creek. So I think that, like, this grant is not specifically related to the construction and maintenance of stormwater management ponds. It's to do to place some benches around that stormwater management pond. At the stormwater management pond at Rice Road and Port Robinson Road, the landscaping feature there is basically a feature along the pathway that with people coming into the town East Fawn Hill from Welland down Rice Road, we'll see a landscaping feature as well. It'll provide an area for all users of the pathway, including cyclists and pedestrians walking on the trail, to have a spot to sit and rest and reflect. It won't impede on the performance and operation of that stormwater management pond.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director. Why is there a fence around the one at Port Robinson and Rice Road versus none around the one at Highway 20 in Port Robinson? What is the difference, and why the fence?
The Director of Planning has indicated she can answer that.
Sorry about that. Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you. So the one at Port Robinson and Rice Road, it's partially fenced where it leads onto the rear yards of homeowners. That's a requirement from the Conservation Authority because they don't want people to have their rear yards encroach into that area. Otherwise, they've been designed so that they don't need to be fenced. The slope of them is fairly gentle, and the landscaping material has also been designed and has been reviewed by staff in terms of the landscape and the ability to maintain that landscape. So it's part of the review that goes on when when these systems are designed. So generally we try not to fence them unless there is some kind of safety requirement or there's an encroachment issue.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other I see Councillor Stewart?
Sorry, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if, as part of this, would there be a possibility of, say, perhaps a service club or an individual who wanted to purchase one of the benches to have installed, in memory of someone or, for whatever reason? I know they would, be standardized, but would there be the option available for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think Vicky may have more information on this. So we do run a program that allows residents to purchase a bench as a memorial. But Vicky, do you want to make any comments?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have an ongoing program for bench donations, and absolutely anywhere in the community, we work with the person that would like to donate, and they would be recognized on the bench.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Further to that, so when this was brought forward to us some time ago, I actually asked about the benches, and I had asked that we endeavor to meet with the beautification committee to ask that very question, to see if we can have an alliance with them to work together and have people donate benches, because right now we're looking at 50%, which is $24,000. I don't know what portion of $24,000 is the benches, but if there's people that want to purchase benches, then, I mean, is that not a discussion that you then had with the beautification committee? Because that's, I think, what I'd asked for back when we talked about this last time. So I'm guessing that wasn't a topic of discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did meet with the beautification committee, and they are in support of the project. There's a for the landscaping feature and benches and armor stone at the intersection of Rice Road and Port Robinson Road, there's a very clear defined scope of work. With respect to the opportunities at the Highway 20 and Rice Road stormwater management pond and the benches, there really is no set plan in place until we put a tender package together. And obviously, the beautification committee would be included as part of the design and scoping of that work. They have identified that as part of their endorsement that's attached to this report, that they would like to see some involvement with respect to the number of benches and where they're positioned in and around that stormwater management pond. But the $12,000, so the $12,000 PRIP funding for the benches around the stormwater management pond at Highway 20 and Rice Road are designated to be for benches. That's what the region had identified in their grant.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? If not, I will turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will call the vote. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Motion is passed unanimously. Mr. Mayor, our procedural bylaw does ask that we conclude the meeting by 9 o'clock. Even though we started late, the procedural bylaw does still say 9 o'clock. So I do have a motion to extend the curfew time. What we have left on the agenda is consideration of bylaws that haven't already been done, and then the closed session items. So I'll present the motion and ask for discussion. I do have it moved by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Wink, that the rules of procedure as contained in the Town of Pelham procedural bylaw be suspended, and that the specified meeting curfew time of 9 p.m. be waived, and that the remainder of the business listed on the agenda for the meeting continue to be considered until all matters have been concluded.
Any discussion, questions on this motion? If not, we will ask the clerk to call the vote.
Councillor Hahn? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Wink?
Yes.
And Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Passed unanimously. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is the presentation and consideration of bylaws on a motion by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that the Council for the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the Mayor and Clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. Bylaw 4250 being a bylaw to amend the 2020 fees and charges to be collected by the Corporation of the Town of Pelham and to amend the Recreation and Culture Services schedule. Bylaw 4253 being a bylaw to prohibit and abate public nuisances in public places within the Town of Pelham. Bylaw 4254 being a bylaw to permit owners or occupants of any buildings, fences, or structures, or their agents or employees to enter upon any adjoining land for the purpose of making repairs, alterations, or improvements to such buildings, fences, or other structures, and to repeal and replace bylaw 1155, 1987. Bylaw 4255 being a bylaw to adopt an amendment to the official plan for the Town of Pelham planning area. Amendment number 10, implementation of short-term accommodation recommendations. Bylaw 4256-2020 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended with respect to short-term accommodation in the Town of Pelham, file AM 1218. Bylaw 4257 being a bylaw to license, regulate, and govern the operation of short-term accommodations in the Town of Pelham. And Bylaw 4258-2020 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan agreement for the lands municipally known as 190 Canberra Road, Dehan Homes, Incorporated, file SP 0219. Members of Council will recall that 4251 and 4252 were considered previously, having been lifted. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any discussion, questions on these bylaws? Councillor Kaur.
Councillor Kaur, you are muted.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. Can we separate bylaw 5254 separate for a separate vote?
Certainly. So the motion then would be to consider all of the other bylaws, save and except 4254.
Yes, thank you.
So is there any discussion on the rest of the bylaws?
Yeah. Not seeing any.
Okay, so members of council, I will call the vote on all those saving except 4254. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And those bylaws are carried. So now a separate vote on 4254. Did you wish to call for discussion on that?
Yes, I think perhaps you should. Any discussions, comments on this bylaw before we call the vote? Oh, not seeing any. Okay, I guess we're ready for the vote. Dan?
Okay, Councillor Hahn.
No.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The vote carries. Members of council, the next item on the agenda is the resolution to move into closed session. Moved by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following. Pursuant to the Municipal Act Section 239.2, 239.2D, labor relations or employee negotiations, and 239.2J, financial information that belongs to the municipality or local board and has monetary value or potential monetary value. I will call the vote. Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
The motion carries. If you'll just give staff a few moments to stop the live streaming And the recording we will resume in closed session.